We can build little statues. That would be fun. That'd be really fun. Okay, here's the prompt coming up on the board. So he's so pretty. Yeah, I like that. All right, here it is. So we're talking about loyalties today. We're going to continue those character charts and like talking about them that you started last time when you were looking at Kent and the Fool and Oswald. So you're thinking about your own loyalties as a way to get into this. Who are you loyal to? Whom are you loyal? Or what are you loyal to? Do you think you could be loyal to more than one thing at a time? And does it make you better or worse as a person to be loyal to these things? Okay, discuss amongst yourselves.
Which direction?
The pledge?
Yeah.
It was good.
Okay. So who am I ever loyal? I'm loyal to Street Going.
You have the answer to
My voice. That's it. That's it. What is this picture? Why did Aiden send this?
No.
I don't know. Aiden sent this a little bit. What is it? Why do you look like that? Yes. Why does this? He said it's like 30 pounds. Okay. Yeah, we were sending each other like we were. But I didn't send it. I think you can be equally loyal to the one person thing as long as those things don't contradict each other. Well, I think well, if you're loyal like Jedi, you can be also equally loyal to the dark side. Still fight. Well, what is your loyalty? That's right. Equally, yeah, equally happy. True. No.
Okay, pull out those character charts you were working on last time.
Shut up.
The character charts you were working on last time.
Oh, I wasn't here last time.
Oh. You were doing them in groups, right?
I was doing this.
So I think that it was groups of 3. And I'll just put Isaac in one of those groups. Oh, you guys over there are missing someone. So Isaac, you'll work with them.
I wasn't here either. Okay.
Oh, Allie wasn't here either?
I don't remember what our groups were. Did we just divide the class up?
No, there were 3.
Oh.
Who's in our?
Yeah.
Um,
I don't remember either.
I think.
Allie, I'll have you work with Octavia for this. Okay, but in the meantime, sorry, I forgot. Let's go through the actual play and figure out what's going on in Act 2.
Well, I just know there was one dude take a like chain.
Yes. All right, so I I think let's just do this as a class. Let's go through each scene and make sure we know what's going on here. So Act 2, Scene 1, and feel free to take notes on your actual play. If any parts of this were confusing. So Act 2, Scene 1, we are back at the castle. Back at Lear's sort of central base, you know, and Edgar and Edmund and Gloucester still live there. And Edgar is talking about, he's talking to just like an attendant, so just like one of his, you know, servants, about sort of what's going on between Duke of Cornwall and Lear and the Duke of Albany, and it looks like there's already starting to brew some like a little bit of conflict between them. The whole reason Lear divided his kingdom was to avoid conflict after he died, and yet here are sort of rumors of conflict starting to brew, and that people might want more. People might want more land. So in dividing up before he died, he actually angered everybody. Then Edgar and Edmund start talking, and Edmund is still like, Edgar, you know, Dad's looking for you. Like, Dad is so mad at you. You have to leave. You have to go hide. And Edgar's like, oh, thank you so much, brother. You know, like I can trust you. And Edmund says, oh, here comes Dad. We better play fight really quick so that I can stay on Dad's side. And I think the way he's doing this is like, then I can influence Dad to, you know, take you back or whatever. I don't know why Edgar falls for this particular part of the plot because it is dumb. But Edgar and Edmund like kind of play fight. And Edmund wounds his own arm. So they play fight, Edgar flees, and Edmund like cuts his own arm to say that Edgar did it to him. So he's like, Dad, look what my brother did. And Gloucester's like, oh, he's such a villain, you know. And Edmund's still just playing his game. Is there anything else we need to add to that part of the plot? I think that kind of covers it.
He's like so sneaky.
He's really sneaky. Yeah, well, he's a bastard, so that's what's expected of him, you know. Oh, one thing that's really interesting is the way that Edmund speaks for Edgar on lines like 77. This is on page 77, line 77. So he says that he's like, I dissuaded him from his intent. So I'm like, I was trying to talk my brother out of killing you. And with cursed speech, I threatened to discover him, like I was going to tell on him. And he replied, thou unpossessing bastard, dost thou think if I would stand against thee with the reposal of any trust, virtue, or worth in thee, make thy words faith? No. What I should deny, as this I would, though thou didst produce my very character, I'd turn it all to thy suggestion, plot and damned, I don't know how you'd say that with the accent, practice, and thou must make a dullard of the world if they thought the profits of my death were very pregnant and potential spurs to make thee seek it. So basically he's saying, oh yeah, I told Edgar that I was going to tell on him and I was going to like talk about this plot, but he just called me a bastard and said, no one's going to trust you because you're such a bastard, you know, like no one's going to actually like believe you in any way. So Edmund's using the stereotypes of his birth and being illegitimate to play these two off of each other. Edgar would never say this to Edmund, but Edmund is sort of putting the mouths of all of society into Edgar's mouth. It's so hard to talk about the two because their names are so similar. Okay. Then Cornwall and Regan are here at the castle, and Gloucester tells them, let's see, let's make sure. Let's just skip to scene 2. Scene 2 is when Kent is coming to tell Regan that King Lear is coming, right? So Kent is Lear's servant. He's coming to say, hey, your dad is coming here, and he's met by Oswald, and they get into a fight. Did you catch what causes the fight? It's right at the very beginning of scene 2 on page 83. Yes.
oh, but you do.
Yeah. And it's not just, why should I tell you? It's like, he says, in the mud. So Oswald says, where can I put the horses? And Kent's like, you can put them in the mud. Like, it's just like immediately starts this fight with Oswald. So there is something like deep within Kent that hates Oswald and everything Oswald represents, at least as far as I can tell. The only thing that Oswald has done to be offensive is to say that the king is Goneril's father rather than the king. He like addresses him as my lady's father, and that like pisses Kent off so much that they actually have this like sword fight. They call each other like old and slave, and Oswald starts like, so Kent is basically like hitting him, and Oswald starts going, help, oh, murder, help, which I just like Oswald a lot, even though he's awful. And Kent is like hitting Oswald, and this is when the rest of them come in and they decide to put Kent in the stocks. So the stocks are like, in old-fashioned movies, they have their hands in here and their head, and they're like stuck like this, but it specifically says in this play they also do the legs part. So the stocks, there could be two parts, and so he's like sitting with his legs and his arms out and his head in these stocks. So it's like supposed to be like physically a little bit punishing because it's an uncomfortable position, but mostly it's a humiliation. So he's put into these stocks, and this is when Lear enters the scene. We're skipping scene 3 for a second. Scene 4, this is where Lear enters the scene and he sees Kent in the stocks. Now, why would this be like, why is Lear so upset about this? What was it?
It's like his own servant, so it's like punishing.
Yeah, it's not that he's like that mad that Kent was punished. He just feels like it should have been him to do the punishing, not his daughter to do the punishing. So yeah, it was like an insult to him. I should have this authority over my servants. If you have a problem with your servants, then you have a problem with me, type of thing. And it says like Kent is like, yeah, it was your daughter and your son-in-law put me in these stocks. And on line 25, page 99, Lear says they durst not do it. They could not, would not do it. 'Tis worse than murder to do upon respect such violent outrage. Why would Lear think that this is worse than murder? Because I get why it's disrespectful. Why would it be worse than murder? Yeah, that's part of it. What is it in his character though that would make it worse than being killed to have someone disrespect his servant? Yes, so
But here's like built up this like authority as part of the monarchy, right? And now that part of the like this like you can't have this and so that
yes.
and so by putting stocks then Reagan is like just adding to like the idea of this like
Yes.
so therefore
Yes,
that makes sense.
it does, and I think you are absolutely right. Yes,
Yes,
I think that he's talking here. So Lear believes in the divine right of kings, and we know this because he's constantly calling on the heavens to say, like, what should I do in this situation? He feels like he's got this relationship to fate and the heavens, and for him he's a pagan, so like sort of nature itself, to give him his authority as king. So if that is crumbling in any way, that sort of divinity and like who he is as king, which is dependent on authority and dependent on people obeying his authority, then he is losing all identity. He's nothing without his authority. So it's almost like, to say worse than murder, I think it's interesting that it's worse than murder, because your definition would be like, this is killing him, this is murder, right? But I feel like it's more like a zombification. Ooh, is that a word? Let's pretend it is. It's turning Lear into a kind of zombie, a walking dead person, because he doesn't have the authority anymore that created his identities, but he's still living, so he doesn't have the identity, and that's worse than murder, you know? So This is a horrible insult to him. And the fool is trying to talk him down, trying to say like, it's, you know, you gave away your land before you died. These are sort of the results of that. But Lear is super worked up when Reagan comes into the room. So Reagan comes in and he's thinking like, oh, I'm hoping so much that you are going to like treat me better, right? But he's skeptical on line. So go to 105. On line 145. He's like, Reagan, I think you are. I know what reason I have to think so. If thou shouldst not be glad, I would divorce me from thy mother's tomb, sepulchering an adulteress. So when he sees Reagan for the first time, he's like, are you Reagan? And I think we might confuse that for him being a little senile, which he has been showing throughout this play, but it's something more than that. He's like, you couldn't possibly be my daughter because of this kind of disrespect. Like, I didn't raise you to be this way, is basically what that line is saying. And he's like, but then he switches and he's like, beloved Reagan, thy sister's not, like, your sister sucks. Oh, Reagan, she hath tied sharp-toothed unkindness like a vulture here. I can scarce speak to thee. Thou'lt not believe with how depraved equality. Oh, Reagan. So he's like kind of saying to Reagan, like, you can't believe how badly your sister treated me. I know you're going to treat me better, right? And Reagan says, this is on the top of 107. I pray you, sir, take patience. I have hope you less know how to value her desert than she to scant her duty. And Lear says, say, how is that? And Reagan says, I cannot think my sister in the least would fail her obligation. If, sir, perchance she have restrained the riots of your followers, 'tis on such ground and to such wholesome end as clears her from all blame. My curse is on her, Lear says, and Reagan responds, oh, sir, you are old. So explain what's happening in that scene between the sisters and between Lear. What's happening with like family loyalties?
It's kind of like the sisters are teaming on him. They're kind of like pushing him down to like them getting full power
Yes.
over what he's starting to grant them, instead of him like holding on to a sliver of control. So like the sisters are working together. So Reagan right there is like, she's like, oh no, my sister's great. If she did anything to offend you, I'm sure it was just out of, pure love, and she didn't mean it.
Yeah. Yes. And this was their plan from the very beginning. Remember when they're plotting before they separate and they say, Lear will go with you for a month and then he'll come with me. They're like, okay, well then we need to be sort of together in purpose. It's kind of like how parents do this before giving a child a punishment. They'll be like, okay, we need to be on the same page about this. Like, this is what we're going to do to punish the child, right? And so it's like that reversal of roles that's so painful here too. And for Reagan to say, oh, sir, you are old, that's like his biggest insecurity, is the fact that he is getting old and he's losing control of his mind and his power. And she just says, you're old. You should be ruled and led by some discretion that discerns your state better than yourself. We now know better than you. You're old, so sit back and just let us take charge. And for us to understand this is why I like Lear so much. We're going to talk about this next time, but this is such a play about empathy. And for the people reading this play and experiencing this play, they're not going to be in the same state of mind as Lear. This isn't a play about relating to the main character because we don't know what that feels like, right? But here it's like really asking us to relate and empathize with somebody who is near the end of life and losing control. And if you really think about what that not just could be like, but like will be like, it's a really scary idea that like at some point you're not going to be the adult that you're becoming. You're going to sort of like, fall down the other side of that and become somebody who has to be taken care of. And you're going to have to listen to young people of like another generation, which like I feel the boomers' anger. You're gonna have to listen to the millennials telling the boomer, that you don't know better anymore. Like, you don't know the way of the world. You're losing your mind. Just let us take care of you in the way that we know how. And it's like this horrible moment for her. And Reagan suggests that Lear asks Goneril's forgiveness. Like, oh, I'm sure she did nothing wrong. Why don't you go and say you're sorry? And that, Lear blows up at that. Like, he is so mad at Reagan now, and he's just like, you will never know what it feels like to be me. He says this on the top of 109 or in the middle of 109. No, Reagan, thou shalt never have my curse. Thy tender-hefted nature shall not give thee o'er to harshness. So it's like, you'll never know how terrible it is to be me. Then enters Goneril, and Reagan and Goneril take each other's hands in front of Lear. So Goneril comes over and she's like, hi dad, but holds hands with the sister to like show really clearly who's teamed up against him, right? And this is on 111. Goneril says, or Reagan's like, Lear's like, oh, Reagan, will you take her by the hand? Like this girl who has, scorned me so much. And Goneril says, why not by the hand, sir? How have I offended? All's not offense that indiscretion finds in dotage terms so. We talked about dotage last time. What does it mean? What does dotage mean? This is line like 226 on page 12. All's not offense that indiscretion finds in dotage terms so. It means like senility, and they're going to use it over and over again in this. So to be dotty is to be like out of your mind, right? So if dotage terms so, it's like, you just don't know what's going on, Dad. I didn't offend you. And this kind of makes Lear sort of start questioning it himself. And Reagan says, look, just go back with Goneril. You can go back and she'll take care of you. And on 113, Lear says, return to her and 50 men dismissed? No, rather I abjure all roofs and choose to wage against the enemy of the air. Like, I am not going to go back if I can't have my guys with me. And Reagan tells him, and then he says, I can stay with Reagan, I and my 100 knights. And Reagan says, not altogether so. And so she says, no, you can't have 100 knights at my house either. And they start to sort of go down. So Reagan on 280 or so says, you can only bring 25 to my house. So it used to be 100, then it goes down to 50. And then he says 25, or Reagan says 25. And Lear responds with, I gave you all. So it's like, I gave you to everything, all of my power. And I think you can think of the way that a parent would say that too. Like, I have given you all my love and all my attention. I've given you my life. And Reagan says, and in good time you gave it. What does she mean by that? Yeah, Cecilia. Yeah, like, yeah, you waited long enough, before you gave me all this power. And then Goneril steps in and says, what needs you 5 and 20? Like, why do you need 25 knights, 10 or 5? And Reagan says, what needs you 1? So go to 117. And I think this reveals a little bit about the sisters that we need to keep in mind still, that we've been talking about all along. So Goneril's like, you don't need 25 servants. You don't need 10 servants or 5 servants. It's almost like, it's like when a child is negotiating for something and they're like, how about 5 more minutes, to play video games? And the mom's like, how about 1 more minute now? Like as the negotiation is happening, it's like getting lower and lower. That's what the sisters are doing in this reverse of power to Lear. And Reagan says, what need 1? So what does this tell about the sisters' dynamics and their relationship to each other? Yeah, Whitney.
Like they're very manipulative. So like when they work together, like they're benefiting themselves, but they're playing it also, it looks like it's benefiting the other.
Yeah.
So, by Reagan doing this, it's like her benefit, because once Lear does come in the next month or whatever, then he won't have that many nights. But for
That's a great
now,
point.
it's just making Goneril look good because she'll take more to Lear.
Yeah.
And like manipulating Lear to think one's better than the other.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, so that Reagan might be saying like, look, you're better off with her than you are with me. Yeah, I also get this feeling of competition between them still, where Goneril is like, well, you can only have now 5 knights if you come here. And Reagan's like, you can't even have a single one if you come to my house. So it's like almost like one-upping in terms of cruelty. And Reagan and Lear is just like, how dare you? And he turns to his fool and he says, oh, fool, I shall go mad And this is where we are introduced to this idea of a storm. Cornwall is like, okay, look, this is Reagan's husband. He's like, okay, look, we've tried to negotiate this, but there is a storm coming. We should go inside. Usually they're like in a courtyard for this part. And Lear storms off, and Gloucester follows him to see what's going on. And he says, this is the very end. Let's look at this one carefully. He says, the king is in high rage. And Cornwall says, whither is he going? Gloucester says, he calls to horse, but will I know not whither? Cornwall, 'tis best to give him way. He leads himself. So like that stubborn old man, he's going to do what he wants to do. And Goneril says, my lord, entreat him by no means to stay. So she's like saying to Gloucester, like, don't even try and talk him into staying here at the castle. Gloucester says, alack, the night comes on, and the high winds do sorely ruffle. For many miles about, there's scarce a bush. So like if he goes out there, there's like no shelter for him to seek. They're out kind of like on the moors, so it's just like really harsh, rocky, sparse scenery. And so he says there's not even a bush for him to hide under. And Regan's like, oh sir, to willful men the injuries that they themselves procure must be their schoolmasters. So what does Regan say right there? To willful men the injuries that they themselves procure must be their schoolmasters. Yeah.
Kind of like they've got to learn for themselves. And learn it the hard way.
Yeah, like if they're going to make their mistakes, then let their mistakes teach them the hard way. Shut up your doors. Okay, that's stronger than it sounds right there. Shut up your doors is kind of like, so the castle doors would usually just be open to people, coming in and out. She's saying like lock the doors basically so that Lear can't get back in, even if he tries to get back in. So she's like, shut up your doors. He is attended with a desperate train, meaning like Kent and the fool are like sort of like leading him astray. And what they may incense him to, being apt to have his ear abused, wisdom bids fear. So lock him out, let him make his mistakes. He chose his followers. This is what's going to happen to him. And Cornwall says, all right, shut up your doors, my lord. 'Tis a wild night. My Regan counsels well. Come out of the storm. So basically, he's just like, we wash our hands of all responsibility for this guy. And you have to picture Lear's state of mind too. He's old. He's losing his mind. He's feeble. He like knows that he's losing his mind, and they are basically like shut him out into a storm. And it's not just any storm. It is like a really bad storm that is coming. And they're like, let him fend for himself, rather than like going and trying to like talk him back into coming. Like I feel like all of us, hopefully, our parents would be in that state of mind, and you'd let them be mad for a second, but as soon as they were in like bodily danger, you would make sure that they were safe. Not Goneril and Regan. They're like, lock the doors, let him do what he's gonna do. All right, so that's where we end with Lear. In the meantime, there's a little scene with Edgar that's a little bit confusing. This is scene 3. And he gives this little speech about, I heard myself proclaimed, and by the happy hollow of a tree escaped the hunt. So usually in this scene, Edgar is inside like literally a tree, like a little hollowed out section of a tree, hiding from his brother and his dad. And it says that he has my face all grimed with filth, blanket my loins, elf all my hair in knots. So basically he's like picking up dirt and rubbing it all over him. And he, for whatever reason, decides to go usually thematically it works, but right now logically it doesn't work. He takes off his clothes and like puts on like a loincloth type thing. So he's covered in dirt, his hair is grimy, he's half naked, and he says, I'm gonna go by this name, Poor Tom. So basically he's gonna play to be like a crazy homeless person out on the moors. And he says, Edgar, I nothing am. And I told you to look for those words, nothing. That's one of those important moments where Edgar is like, I'm no longer Edgar, the legitimate son who heir to Gloucester. I am now Poor Tom, the crazy bum out on the moors, right? Bum is not a nice word to say anymore, but that's okay. All right, that is Act 2. Did I miss anything important? I think we've got it. Now the character charts. All right, so you're looking at Kent, the Fool, and Oswald. And I think we really get a sense of their characters even more in Act 2. So you started with their sort of characters in Act 1 and what they're all about. Now I want you to ask yourself, To whom is your character loyal? So write that down on the top of your character sheets. To whom is your character loyal? Just so you don't forget that question. Okay, and then which group had Kent? You guys were Kent. You guys are going to look at scene 2, line 75. So Act 2, scene 2, line 75. This is on page 87. And it's the speech that starts, that such a slave as this should wear a sword. You got it? Okay, you're gonna look at that whole speech. All right, who's Oswald? You guys were Oswald. You guys are looking at scene 2, line 125. So right after that, page 91. And it's the speech that starts, I never gave him any. It pleased the king, his master, very late. You got it? Okay, you guys are gonna look at that little speech there. And then you guys have the fool then? All right, the fool, you're gonna look at scene 4, line 74. So this is on page 101. And it's the one that starts, we'll set thee to school to an ant to teach thee to know that there's no laboring in the winter. You got it? Okay, so for each of these different scenes, you're using the character chart sort of just to remember what you said about these 3 characters. But for each of these little speeches, each group is going to break down their speech to figure out exactly what it means. So you don't need to put it into modern English like we did with Edmund, but you're figuring out exactly what does this speech mean and how does it answer the question, to whom is your character loyal? Think about like, I think it's like to whom, but also to add, let's add to that, why is your character loyal to this person as well? So to whom are they loyal and why are they loyal? Make sense? So you're really breaking apart that speech. I want to be able to ask you any question about that speech and you like know the answer to it. Okay, and use whatever resources you want. You can get online if you want to. Okay, if you're working at home, just use the same character that you did in class. And if you don't remember who that is, just pick one of those. And if you need to rewind the video to find the scene numbers and whatnot, that's okay. So you're just kind of, just take notes on your actual packet or your book and take a picture of what you come up with. So you're basically, I'm going to have you just annotate that one really carefully so that you know all parts of the speech. Okay, I changed the assignment because I want you to go deeper with this. So I'm going to post the character chart and you already finished the first half of it with the chart. And now you're going to answer the questions on the second half. And for each of the questions, you are going to find evidence in this little speech. So you're going to try and answer all the questions just based on the speech that I gave you. So let's start with Kent. The angriest of the 3, I think. Let's everybody turn to Kent's speech then. So this is scene 2, line 75. We're on page 87. All right, I'm going to read it and then you guys are going to tell me what's going on in it. So he is so mad and Cornwall says, why art thou angry? And Kent says that such a slave as this should wear a sword, who wears no honesty. Such smiling rogues as these, like rats, oft bite the holy cords of twain, which are too entreace to unloose. So like too sort of entwined to unloose. Smooth every passion that in the natures of their lords rebel, being oil to fire, snow to the colder moods, renege, affirm, and turn their beaks with every gale and vary of their masters, knowing not like dogs, but following a plague upon your epileptic visage. Smile you my speeches as I were a fool. Goose, if I had you upon Sarum Plain, I'd drive you cackling home to Camelot. So he gives the whole speech and then Oswald's just sitting there like laughing at him and he's like, smile you in my speeches? Like he's sort of like, I always picture him sort of like flying at him again and being held back. And what's so great is that Oswald is a younger man and Kent is older, isn't he like 48 or something, we found out, but ancient in Shakespeare's time, I guess. And so here's this old man trying to like, come at me, bro, you know, to a young guy. Okay, so tell me what he is saying in that speech.
There,
Oops.
first he's like, I am, like, this guy is wearing has like a sword like a gentleman, and he's looking like that, but it's actually just a slave. And then he's like, he's not honest. And then he's like, he goes into and then it goes on to be like, just like his people. So, when your master is like on one, then you just kind of like, and just say yes and no.
Yeah.
Like, you just go with what your master is feeling. And then kind of like going along with that, goes into the dog. It's like, just do whatever the master says, and he's like, you have a stupid face. Which is my favorite line.
I hate your face.
And then he's like, don't laugh at me like I'm a fool. If I like had my say, I would just like send you back to where you came from.
Yes. Okay, good. So what does this tell us about Kent's loyalties then? Why is Kent so loyal to Lear? Because he's so mad for the way that Oswald shows his loyalties, right? But what is the difference between how Kent feels versus how he thinks Oswald feels? Yeah.
I think it's about like honesty, because it's like he wears no honesty, but like Kent's being honest with Lear, it feels like honesty is like the best thing about a relationship. And it's like Oswald's not honest to the person.
Yes. And I think it's really important how you're talking about it as like a relationship and being friends with somebody. Like, I think Kent sees himself as more than just a servant, or he's at least distinguishing between what a slave is and what a servant is. Yeah. Yeah.
Shows loyalty, so it's like, are you sure I've got to go talk to the king? Yeah, okay, all right.
Right.
Like, can I do it tomorrow? No. All right, I'm going. I promise, I'm going.
Right.
And Ken said, you should be on top of that. Like, you should be doing it. Yes or no, you should do what your master wants, and you should do it right away.
I think Kent, though, will speak honesty to power still. So it's like he's like, you should be serving your master right away, and you should be doing it sort of with your whole heart rather than like, oh, this is just a job, you know? But he also says, like, you are a slave because you wear no honesty. Like, you won't tell the person that you serve that they are in the wrong. And remember what Kent does at the very beginning of this play. He speaks honesty to power. And we might think that that is Kent, like, being sort of loyal to himself, thinking like, I have this sort of like duty to myself and who I am and like what I find important to say this to my king. But I think the way that he words it here, we see that he sees this as part of his service, that it's like his job is to steer the king in good directions, you know? He's like, such smiling rogues as these, like rats, oft bite the holy cords of twain. What is he referring to when he says holy cords? Did you guys have anything to say about the holy cords? What do you guys think he means? This is fun, having a good time. Not us, we're not having a good time. Holy cords are like matrimony, right? So to be tied together with someone through holy cords, it's sort of like this idea that it's like sanctified, that your bond is sort of like, it's bigger than just a job for Kent, right? These are holy cords that tie the servant to the master. Yeah. Maybe in a very platonic way, but in a very like service oriented way, right? So he sees it as like it's not just like a job for him. It is like I am like holy, I am divinely bound to this man that I serve. And so he doesn't see it as being fired. Like we always think in this play, when Kent comes back to him in this disguise, we're like, what a, a simp for Lear. Like he's so like he's so naive and so stupid that he would go to this back to this guy who mistreated him. According to this speech and how he sees Oswald, why would he go back? Why would Kent go back to Lear, even though Lear has banished him and said, I'll kill you if I see you in 7 days? Yeah, I think so. In this case, it is not attachment to Lear himself. Lear is the king, and Kent's attachment is to the king. He says at the when he reunites with Lear, I'm not going to find it, but he says, "Who do you serve?" And he's like, "Why do you want to come to me?" Like Lear says that to Kent. Why would you want to come to me? And Kent says, "Because you have authority." And so Kent is the only one in this play, I'm pretty sure the only one who still sees Lear as having authority. What does that tell us about the way he sees kings? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Right. Yes, he does not think that kings can just give away their power. They are born, they are chosen by God to be in this position. And Kent, chosen to be a servant, is there to serve this divinely appointed person, right? And so Kent, he sees it as his duty to steer Lear into like those divine decisions, to speak truth to power, because maybe maybe in our terms, we're thinking like, when is it the man speaking and when is it divine power speaking? Kent is making sure that Lear is always in line with his position, and that's how he sees it. And so there's something like more here about like the authority. So he calls Oswald a slave. What are the characteristics of a slave to Kent? Yeah, better. Okay, good. He sees the slave as weak. How else does he see a slave? Okay, yeah, not well, yes. Like, I think he's seeing it as won't share his own thought process. Because I don't think he's saying like, oh, you're like so stupid that you just go along with whatever Goneril says in the way that like you have no thoughts of your own, but it's like you won't speak those thoughts. Mm-hmm. Because he calls him a rat. And I think a rat is like, a rat is sneaky, right? What else is a rat? They kind of like hide. Yeah, good. Okay, so hides feelings and thoughts, sneaky, out for themselves, selfish. Yeah. Unintelligent, yeah. Anything else about what's a slave for him? Kind of like it's a job. This is just a job, and it's a job with no choice. It's like you haven't made your own choices in how you serve this person. You are just doing what the job entails. If it were my job, you come to school, you get the curriculum, you do the curriculum, and whenever administration tells you to do something, take this survey or teach it in this way, you just do it because it's for the job. What's the difference between that and a servant, do you think? Because Kent does see himself as a servant. He'll call himself a servant, but there's a distinction here between slave and servant. In fact, a little bit later, he even says, I serve the king. Yeah, Debbie.
Viewed as like a job, it's like service, kind of like it's a relationship. It's like, yeah, it's like taking care of the king.
Good. Caregiving. Purpose in life. Good. What else about a servant? Yeah. Yeah, it's a kind of like, so along with service, it's a kind of charity. It's not just a charity to the king, though. It's a charity to your country. It's a patriotic position to be a servant and to serve the king. He doesn't say I serve Lear, he says I serve the king, like I serve the kingdom. Okay, so he sees these two distinctions, and then Oswald's going to defend himself here. So let's go to Oswald's speech. This is on page 91, so everyone go there with me. And he says, I never get, oh, so Cornwall's like, what offense did you give this old man? And Oswald says, I never gave him any. It pleased the king, his master, very late to strike at me upon his misconstruction. He is talking about how when he referred to the king as, you're my mistress's father. And he says, he struck me for no good reason when he, compact and flattering his displeasure, tripped me behind, being down, insulted, railed, and put upon him such a deal of man that worthied him, got praises of the king for him attempting who was self-subdued. And in the fleshment of this dread exploit, drew on me here again. All right, tell me about this speech. What's he talking about in this speech, Oswald, people?
So here he's kind of like complaining like a child, and he's insulting not only king, he's kind of insulting the king, because he's like with the got the praises of the king, he's showing like how the king reacts to a servant versus like someone else's servant or slave and how he sees them. And it's like showing he's like, just because I don't have a connection with him doesn't mean like you can just kick me around like a soccer ball. And he's like, it strengthens like the competitiveness between the sisters, because he's like, look at this, like this is the king's servant, he's treating me bad and the king's praising him for it. So like he's not respecting me, which means he's not gonna respect your servants. So why does he get to have so many? And then he goes into it and it's just like just tells Kent, he's like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to.
Yeah, okay, good. So what does that tell us, the way that he sees his loyalty then? He is Goneril's servant, right? How does he see himself as Goneril's servant? Maybe as a compared to Kent.
I think there's it's like who would ever like it'd be like just like
Yeah, I think he takes some pride in his position. Now that Goneril has gotten some power, he's like, woof, I'm important in this kingdom now, right? And he says, when he says upon his misconstruction, he's lying there. He's, again, just like Kent accused him of lying for his own good, he's saying like, he hit me for no good reason, but he knows what the reason is. He disrespected the king by calling him your father, or Goneril's father rather than the king, you know? So he kind of has this way of like, not quite lying, but manipulating the truth to get what he wants. I picture Oswald as this guy who just like, he works and then he goes home to his family, and he like has, you know, a dinner, and then he comes back to work and he serves his 8 hours or whatever, and then goes back home. He seems sort of like a union man to me a little bit, just like he doesn't have that kind of dedication that Kent has. So he's like, why would he hit me? Like, what is in it for him? I don't get why Oswald would, Oswald is saying, I don't get why Kent would care this much. Yeah.
I like it's kind of also like a little sibling like the age difference, like you see with Kent and Oswald. It's like an older brother and a younger brother, like the young one, and then like the young brother always like slaps, you know, the little brother like lightly, and they're like, oh Dad, like he did it, and it was for no reason. I totally wasn't going.
Yes.
And they're like, oh no, the poor baby. And so it's like, hold on.
Yeah, I think they see him as like this, it's like you want to protect your employee too, you know? I really love how Oswald stands up for himself on page 87. So Oswald is on the ground and Kent is hitting him saying, strike, you slave, stand, rogue, stand, you neat slave, strike. Like he's like, hit me back, like try it. And Oswald is on the ground saying, help, oh, murder, help, you know, as this old man is kicking his butt. And Oswald, they're like, what happened? And Oswald is like, this ancient ruffian, sir, whose life I have spared at suit of his gray beard. So Oswald then says like, well, I didn't hit him back because he's old. Like I wouldn't want to hit an old man, right? So So Kent is much stronger than Oswald too. And Oswald is just sort of this, like, I just picture him as this skinny little guy who's like, why did he hit me? I didn't do anything wrong, you know, kind of a whiner. All right, so that's slave versus servant. The fool has a very different way of seeing his own sort of service to Lear, if we want to call it that. So the fool, your speech is on 101. So everyone go there with me. And because the fool is difficult to understand, because the fool is the fool, he's difficult to understand. So I'm going to read this to you, and then they'll tell us what it means. We'll set thee to school to an ant to teach thee there's no laboring in the winter. All that follow their noses are led by their eyes, but blind men. And there's not a nose among 20, but can smell him that's stinking. Let go thy hold when a great wheel runs down a hill, lest it break thy net with following. But the great one that goes uphill, let him draw thee after. When a wise man gives thee better counsel, give me mine again. I would have none, but knaves follow it, since a fool gives it. That sir which serves and seeks for gain and follows but for form will pack when it begins to rain and leave thee in the storm. But I will tarry, the fool will stay, and let the wise men fly. The knave turns fool that runs away, the fool no knave, per die. Okay, tell me what that speech means. What is he saying there, Xander?
So we thought it was like he's saying, don't try to hang on the lyric because there's no point doing it. You're not going to keep them. But I'll stay because I'm.
Yeah, I think that is it, right? So let's break it down a little bit. When it says, we'll set thee to school to an ant to teach thee there's no laboring in the winter, what does that part mean?
You don't work when you're not.
Okay, yeah, it's winter time. If you're an ant, you don't go out and like look for scraps in the winter. Everything's frozen. You're not going to get anything from it, right? All that follow their noses are led by their eyes, but blind men, and there's not a nose among 20 that can smell him that's stinking. He says that Lear is stinking. What does that mean, do you think? Yeah.
I think it kind of just means that he's repelling them.
Yeah, he's kind of gone rotten a little bit. He's aged to the point past his ripeness where he is going rotten, and you can smell that rot on him, you know. So he's like he's kind of admitting, the fool is saying, like, yeah, Lear is going insane, going a little bit crazy here. He's got past his prime. Let go thy hold when a great wheel runs down a hill, lest it break thy neck with following. What's that part mean?
So it's like he's saying there's some things like going down, like you don't want to be a part of it because then you don't like it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And then he says a wise man would follow it up on its climb to ascent, right? Kind of how Oswald is doing. A wise man would follow Goneril to the top and sort of get the rewards that she's getting on her way up. So you should follow somebody who's on their way up, not on their way down. But then he says at the very end, but I will tarry, the fool will stay, and let the wise men fly. The knave turns fool that runs away. The fool, no knave. So what's he saying in that last part? People who had the fool speech. Yeah.
Runs away, like, isn't loyal. So that are actually worse in terms of that.
Okay. And so the fool's like, but I'm an idiot, like Xander said, I'm an idiot, so I'm going to be the one who stays. And the fool is using a different word. So Kent says, I'm a servant. He says Oswald is a slave, and Oswald wouldn't like that word, but I don't think he would mind the characterization. And the fool says, I'm a follower. And I don't think he means follow the way that we might say follower. I think when we say follower, it's got a really negative connotation. It almost sounds like blind faith in something, like, he's just a follower, you know? But I think the fool means it's something different. He says, all that follow their noses. I mean, he uses it negatively, but turns it at the end to be a positive. So for the fool, what does a follower do? Both the negative and positives of a follower in this little speech. Yeah. Okay, loyal. And it's loyal in a different way than the servant. The servant is loyal to this position, right? Yeah. Obsessive, maybe a little, yeah. All right, loyal. So the servant's loyal in the way that it's like, I'm loyal to country, right? How is the fool see a follower as being loyal? Yeah.
Kind of more like loyal to an idea.
I think that that's more like the servant still. Loyal to this idea of authority, right? Like loyal to this idea of the king is divine. I think I think a follower is loyal to a person. When you say you're a follower of, I don't know, in a cult, you might say I'm a follower of, I can't think of the cult leader's name. Charles Manson. Charles Manson's a good one. I'm a follower of Charles Manson. You're saying like, I see this person as being sort of like the person I want to attach to. You don't usually say you're a follower of a religion. You usually say you belong to a religion, right? But you're usually a follower of a person. You might say a follower of Christ, but you wouldn't say like I'm a follower of Buddhism. Does that make sense? The distinction. So I think he's seeing it as I am loyal to Lear. And yes, that comes across as a little obsessive. And he even says it is foolish. But what do we think of that idea? That he sees the ship going down. He sees Lear crashing and he's rotten and he's going senile and he has no more power. And he says, but I'm a fool, so I'm going to follow him. Yeah.
I think it's kind of like almost out of pity and like a Pinocchio kind of stance. So he's like, oh man, I'm not going anywhere in life anyway. Maybe someone will notice me if I third wheel someone that used to have authority.
I think for him, he's seeing that more positively. He talks about how he is nothing all the time. In Act 1 especially, or at the end of Act 1, he's always like, I am nothing, I give you nothing, but then he turns it on Lear and says, can you make no use of nothing? And so I think he sees that because he's a fool, he doesn't have to have loyalties to power in the way that servants and slaves do. And instead, he's allowed to be loyal to a person. Honestly, I think a follower is a friend. I think a follower for the fool is, I don't see any gain in this. I'm not getting anything for this. I might even break my neck going down with this person, but I'm going to follow him anyway. And he says, the reason I get to do that is because I am a fool. Because I am nothing in this kingdom, I get to be a friend and I get to be supportive. And yeah, it's dumb, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm a fool, so I get to. So I think he sees his role as positive. I think he's like, I'm an idiot, but I'm not a scoundrel. I am, when he says knave, you use the word scoundrel. That's a great word to use. Maybe No Fear uses, do they use scoundrel? Yeah, I am a fool. I am dumb, but I am a good person. And so I'm going to follow this guy. And I'm not going to follow my king. I'm going to follow Lear to wherever he goes so that I can support him. So I think we see these differences between the three. And I don't think the play is necessarily saying like, be a servant, not a slave, or be a fool be a follower instead of a servant. You know, I don't know that it's being that firm, but it is talking about the benefits and the dangers of each position. Like for a slave, you don't get to have your identity based on your job. You don't have any job satisfaction, right? But it also means you get to stay out of things when they go bad. And maybe you have your own sort of life. If you're a servant, you are serving the country and you have given up everything in service and charity. And that is an amazing thing to do, but you're gonna be in real danger when the thing that you are a servant to ends up not being a good thing to serve, you know, like Lear in the choices that he's making. And if you are a follower, you don't get anything material from this. You might even be in extreme danger being a follower, but you get to be a friend and you get to make actual personal connections with people. And I think the play is looking at the tragedies and the benefits of both. But ultimately, this fool, he is kind of a hero in what he does because it goes so much against the system. In a system that is built on like authority and making sure that you maintain authority, the fool gets to stand outside of that. And because of that, he's in this sort of privileged place where he really can speak truth to power. So I want to, let's talk about this really quick. What does Lear think of these three kind of roles in his life? I think he has experience with all three kinds of, I don't know, subservience. Let's call them subservience. Which one does he want, do you think? When he talks about, you know, how people should be with him, which one does he want? Yeah.
I think as time goes on, he's actually being a follower.
I think he starts to realize, yeah, I think he's kind of like moving towards that. Where is he now if he's not with the follower firmly yet?
I would say probably servant.
I think he wants the servant. Yeah, I think he starts here. And he's slowly moving over here, but maybe not quite yet, you know? So he thinks the servant is this kind of a person. Well, let's talk about this actually. What does Lear think a servant is? Yeah.
I think that he thinks that a servant is everything except for like the part where he speaks his people.
Yes.
Did banish Kent for speaking his people. So I think it's like what he thinks a servant is a slave and a servant, the servant's side.
Yes, okay, I think that's right. I think he sees the divine nature of kings, and so he sees that, yeah, a servant is a calling. This should be their full purpose in life. They should be charitable, and they should be serving me, and by serving me, they're serving my country. But I think that what he's getting, what he actually wants, might be more towards the slave side, where he's like, but I don't want them to speak truth to power, right? Because I am the truth, I am divine. And so he sees this caregiving part as troubling, I think. And so he's like, part of Lear's tragedy is that he's not recognizing the servants for what they are. He's not recognizing that the people who serve him are the ones that are like fully loyal to him. And instead he wants people who are just going to be like yes men. We'd call them sycophants. Do you guys know that word? Sycophants are like just saying yes all the time. Yeah, good one. Sycophants. I think that's how you spell it. All right, so let's see. What time do we have left? I'm trying to think, look at all my pages and we only got through there. So let's talk about why the fool gets to be the fool. Like why the fool gets to be honest. I want you to write down a couple of these somewhere in your book, maybe next to the fool. Number one, the fool exists on the margins of society. They don't need to participate in social hierarchies the way that other people have to. They are kind of like part of the kingdom, but not fully part of the kingdom. You know, they've got power and being like adjacent to the king, but they actually don't have any sort of official role in politics or in government making. So they're on this margin. But they're also just not a part of regular society either. You know, there's peasants and there's serfs and whatever that exist outside the kingdom. The fool's somewhere in between. So he's in this marginal state. Number two, because of that marginal state, they are allowed to mock respectable characters. Because they don't have a place in that hierarchy. So the fool equally mocks Kent, mocks Oswald, mocks the king, like all across the board. I love when the fool says something and Kent's like, oh, where'd you get that knowledge? And the fool is just like, not in the stocks, you know, like he's just making fun of him for being in these stocks. And he gets to do that with the king as well. So because he doesn't have a position, there's no threat to him falling from that position. And there's no like possibility of him gaining in that position. So he gets to say whatever he wants to people. And because of that, they can tell difficult truths. And they get away with it by hiding behind ignorance or comic foolishness. So every time the fool says, oh, I can do this because I'm a fool, it's like he's pointing out, like Xander said, I'm an idiot. But what I am doing is actually the smartest thing to do. What I am doing is actually the best, most moral thing to do. But he doesn't have to say that out loud. He could just mock himself over and over again. Yeah.
And this is just like this is why the fool gets to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, the fool's role in play. Number 4, he gets to manipulate language. And because of that, he creates a kind of like, where we're laughing at insight. We could have a kind of Cordelia character who always stands there, sort of like an angel, and says, "This is the way that we should be, everyone. The moral to this story." But the Fool gets to do that through puns and through plays on language. Reading it in 2021, we don't fully understand most of those, I would say. The Fool is the hardest one to read. But we get to see how he does use these like sort of clever tricks of language. And when using those clever tricks of language, we call them a democratizing voice. What happens is that sometimes Lear doesn't understand the king. Why can't I write that? King doesn't understand what we do understand as the audience. And it creates this dramatic irony that raises the audience above a king. And so it's this, when I call it a democratizing force, it's like an equalizing force, that everyone's on the same level when you get the satisfaction of understanding what the Fool says. And number 6, then, their wisdom depends on the wisdom of the audience. And why that's important is because usually when you watch something and you're like, I understand what that guy's saying, even if nobody else does, it creates a kind of alliance between you and that character. So that you're kind of willing to believe the things that that character says just because you feel empowered by that character. So if you're understanding something that the king doesn't understand, you get that dramatic irony, you're going to be more inclined to see the Fool as a kind of hero that you like, and you see yourself in that play too, through the Fool. Okay, we got lots more to do next time. So I've got some videos for us to watch. And we were gonna watch a Squid Game parody. Wait, let me see if that's gonna actually work. How many of you guys have seen Squid Game?
The SNL one.
Yeah, I was gonna show that parody.
I watched it.
But you didn't see Squid Game yet? Okay, it's super violent, but it is so good. If you are into violence, oh, it's so good. You can't watch it. Don't watch it with the dubs though. You gotta watch it with the subtitles, and then it's very good. Okay, read Act 3 for next time. It's a shorter one. Okay.